Hello, so today we are going to learn about backend web development. What is backend web development with help of Node.js, and we will try to understand what is Node.js exactly, and we will try to figure out all these terms step by step, block by block, one piece by piece. So don't worry. So before that, I would like to show you some couple of websites that we used on our daily basis, like Flipkart, chat-gpt, and all these. All these websites are divided into two parts. Any websites that you use on daily basis are divided into two parts, which is front end and another one is back end. Okay, remember this always, that websites are divided into two parts, front end and back end. So over here you can see there are a variety of cameras over here. I would like to buy some nice camera for me, and suppose I click on this first camera, Sony Alpha. So I am able to click on this particular text or heading of the camera over here. I am able to click over here, and once I click, I can also click, I can see the different description of the camera, what camera specifications are. Then I can click on buy now button. As soon as I click on buy now button, I am now inside the inside my cart. Inside my cart, I am able to click on place order button. As soon as I click on place order button, I am also able to choose different kind of payment options. Suppose if I go with UPI, so I'm able to click on the UPI button. Then I can enter my credentials and complete my order, complete my entire transaction, right? So whatever things which I'm able to interact with on my website, which is on the browser, which is running on the browser, is part of front end. Okay, so all these components over here, this add item button, place order, this particular camera is being shown on the left side, its heading is showing on the right side, all this text which is in black and green color, this nav bar is in blue color, all these all these things which is making me eligible to interact with my website is nothing but part of the front end web development. Okay, and similarly, if I come in the chat GPT over here, you can also see there is a text box. I can enter what is 2 plus 2. I will get the answer over here. So whatever I am able to interact on the chat GPT website is part of the front end. So this was a brief introduction to front end. So you would be aware about what front end is before understanding what is back end. And don't worry, we will be going in depth about front end in my future videos, which I will be posting soon. But in this video, we will be only focusing on backend. So in the front end or in the client side, I wrote what is 2 plus 2 in the text area which is provided to me by the chat GPT in the front end. As soon as I write what is 2 plus 2 and hit on enter, something happened. Some entity helped me to process the result of 2 plus 2 and shared its response to me that 2 plus 2 is equals to 4. So what is this entity? Where is this entity situated? How I am able to communicate with that entity from the front end? So this entity which I am talking about is nothing but backend. So I wrote 2 plus 2 on my front end. What is 2 plus 2? Please give me answer. The request was being created on the front end on my browser, on my local system, right? All this thing happened on my local system, but the response which I got, what is 2 plus 2? The answer is 4. So this calculation of what is 2 plus 2 and this equals to 4 and giving me the response that the answer for your question is 4 is not happening on my local system. This is happening at the backend side. This backend has been hosted on some remote location or on the data center or on the cloud. So similarly, if I go in the Flipkart website over here, as soon as I place order, my request is being parsed or is being sent to the backend. The backend assures me that don't worry, we will send you camera in 2 to 3 days. You don't worry, your money is safe, your camera is also safe, and the backend successfully gives me a response, right? So what are we observing here is that front end is responsible to create a request, backend is responsible to give me a response related to my request. So how to create these backends and who creates these backends so that these backend can process the request that it's going to receive from the front end. So some smart engineers just like you and me created this backend by creating a HTTP server with help of Express.js library using Node.js runtime and deploying that HTTP server on some remote data center so that now our front end or our website can communicate with our backend from any part of the world by just using this URL with help of HTTP protocol and by routing through different pages of our website with help of these routes. So by far, you would have observed that I was using these complex technical terms in my previous statement, like servers, HTTP servers, NodeJS runtime, Express library, URLs, route, HTTP protocols. So if you are getting questions in your mind that what are these complex technical terms, and if these questions are making you feel nauseous, then my friend, please don't worry. We are on a right track, and we will try to understand this each and every concept in deep, and we will try to understand this block by block, piece by piece. So to understand web development thoroughly, we will try to pick the first piece of the puzzle, which is ECMAScript. So now let's try to understand what is ECMAScript. So ECMAScript is a standard or a specification. So let's try to understand ECMAScript with the help of an example. So let's take an example of a sports bike. Suppose you want to run your sports bike on the racing track. So there are certain rules and regulations that your bike should follow before it is eligible to run on the racing track. So, like rules like your bike should be at least 1000 cc, the tires should be broad enough, and the fairing should be like this weight. The entire weight of the bike should range from like 300 to 500 kgs. These are the norms or the regulation that your bike should follow before it is eligible to run on the racing track. So similarly, what ECMAScript mentions is that let me go into the website of ECMAScript. Over here, you can see on the left side of the website, all these are norms or the regulation. So now, whichever language decides to follow the ECMAScript standards, then that particular language needs to inherit all these properties which are mentioned in this ECMAScript website, like the language should comprise of the data types such as undefined type, null type, boolean type, string type. There should be a number type as well, and it should also have like conditional statements like if else block, continue statement, break statement. There should be a for loop. There it should also comprise of the functions, and all these concepts and all these rules and regulations should be inherited by the language which is going to follow the ECMAScript standards. So this is what I was trying to say, that JavaScript is an implementation of the ECMAScript. By what I mean by this is that JavaScript is trying to implement each and every standards which were mentioned in the ECMAScript website. By this I mean that JavaScript is also implementing if-else conditional statements. It also have the data types like undefined, null, string. It also have a function blocks. It also have for loop block. So JavaScript is implementing all the standards which are mentioned in the ECMAScript website. So whenever there is a change in the standards of the ECMAScript, so the creator of the JavaScript should also update the JavaScript language accordingly. But there is also something inside JavaScript which is not part of the ECMAScript. So what I mean by this is that these additional functionalities are not mentioned in the ECMAScript standards. If you go inside the website of the ECMAScript, you will observe that all these additional functionalities are not mentioned in the ECMAScript website, and you won't find there that these particular functionalities or additional functionalities should be compulsorily inherited by JavaScript. So what are these additional functionalities referred to? These additional functionalities are referred to web APIs. Why it is called as web APIs? Because we observed that these additional functionalities were used frequently while we were creating websites, and the developer needed these additional functionalities frequently while creating the websites. Hence these frequently used additional functionalities are called as web APIs. And what are the common used web APIs which we will generally use while creating the websites is that reading data from the file which is fs.read, fetch function which is used to fetch data from the particular URL, local storage.set item which helps you set the local storage with any cookie which you will be needed to authenticate your routes, and document.get element by id which is generally used for DOM manipulation. So these are the commonly used web APIs. I hope the concept of web APIs is clear to you so far. So how your Google Chrome is able to understand the JavaScript which you have written to create your front-end website with HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So there is also a compiler inside your Google Chrome as well, and it's a famous compiler which is called as V8. So the developers at the Google have written this V8 compiler, and what it does is that simply compiles or interprets the JavaScript code which you have written in your website, and it converts it into the machine code which is zeros and one, and successfully compiles it. So suppose if you need to create your own JavaScript browser, and it should also have a compiler so that it can compile the JavaScript code. So that if that's the case, then you need to follow all the ECMAScript standards, and you need to update your compiler with the updating needs of the ECMAScript standards, so that your browser can understand the latest JavaScript code and able to compile it into zeros and ones. So now I hope the concept of ECMAScript and JavaScript is clear to you. ECMAScript is nothing but the standard or a specification, and JavaScript is the language which follows or implements the standards which are written inside the ECMAScript. So I hope this concept is clear. Now let's move on to a very important concept which will help us to create HTTP servers in future, which is Node.js. And what is Node.js runtime? So let's try to understand this concept with help of certain examples. Let's suppose that this particular website is written with help of HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So as soon as I hit this URL, Google Chrome will render a web page for me with help of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, which was written for this website. And my Google Chrome's V8 engine will simply compile the JavaScript logic for whatever functionality which was written for this particular web page, like the functionality for add item button, functionality of place order button, functionality for what would happen if I click on this particular URL. All this logic was written in JavaScript, and this logic is been executed by my V8 engine of Google Chrome. So one thing you need to observe over here is that the JavaScript code or the JavaScript logic is getting executed on your browser and browser itself. The JavaScript logic is not getting executed on my local system, because initially when JavaScript was created, it was always intended to be run on your browsers and browser only, and it was never intended to run on your local systems. So this was all about the front end side, right? The JavaScript is executed perfectly on the browser. There was no issue. It was able to execute on your browser as well. It was not executable on your local system. Okay, this thing is clear. But this was all about front end. So what about backend? Your backend is like a local system. Your backend is running on some system or on cloud or on some data center. So you cannot use JavaScript to execute your backend logic, right? Because JavaScript is not meant to be run on the local system. It is only meant to be run on the browsers. So we were unable to use JavaScript at the backend. We were only using Java, C Sharp and such languages to create our backends and HTTP servers to handle our backend logic and handle the request which we are getting from the front end. So approximately around the year of 2010, some smart group of individuals observed that JavaScript language is been already created. It is a easy language to learn. There are lots of available JavaScript developers as well who are aware about how the JavaScript language works and how to write code in JavaScript. Then why JavaScript is only used for the front-end web development? We all know that the JavaScript only runs on the browser. It was only able to run on the browser. So what they observed is that the reason why it was only able to run on the browser, because of the V8 engine which was available on the browser. V8 engine was responsible to execute the JavaScript code into zeros and ones on the browser. So what these smart group of individual does is that they extracted the V8 engine from the browser, and they extracted this V8 engine into a container. Now this V8 engine or this JavaScript compiler was able to run JavaScript code and able to convert it into zeros and ones on your local system, on your data center, or wherever your HTTP server or your wherever your code or backend logic is been deployed. So this particular container, which was able to execute JavaScript code, or which was able to provide a runtime where the JavaScript code could get executed, is nothing but the Node.js or the Node.js runtime. And this extracted V8 engine become your Node.js framework. So is Node.js a language? No, Node.js is not a language. JavaScript is your language. Node.js is a runtime with which you can use JavaScript as a backend language, just like C Sharp and Java. So what are the use cases of Node.js? Node.js lets you create your CLIs, the command line interface. It help you create games. It help you create HTTP servers. In this course, we will be focusing on how to create HTTP servers using Node.js, and Majority of time, Node.js will be used to create HTTP servers in real life scenarios. So what is HTTP server? And to understand HTTP server, let us first understand what is HTTP protocol. A protocol is a set of rules which machines used to communicate with each other. And what is internet? Internet comprises of all the websites that we use on our daily basis, right? So internet is nothing but the group of machines talking to each other. And in case of websites, HTTP protocol is used by your front end to communicate with the backend. So let's try to understand with an example of the ChatGPT. Over here, I asked ChatGPT what is 2 plus 2 on the front end, and I hit enter. As soon as I hit enter, the particular URL gets hit. This particular URL helps me to redirect to the backend to route by request or HTTP request to the backend. Let me show you in the diagram. Over here, as you can see, the backend server is been hosted in USA. I am requesting ChatGPT to give me 2 plus 2 answer of 2 plus 2 from India. With help of the URL which I mentioned, this is the URL, I was able to route my or redirect my request, HTTP request of what is 2 plus 2 straight from India to USA, where the backend logic was located, so where the chat GPT server was located. And now the chat GPT server, it's chat gpt server's duty to calculate 2 plus 2. I don't know what AI model it will call to calculate the 2 plus 2, but what I am concerned is that the backend logic should give me some response for the request which I have passed to it. So just to mention over here, whatever costly computation which is happening at the backend logic is not happening on my local system or on my browser. If I am asking ChatGPT to give me answer of 2 plus 2, this is not something which is the computation of this logic is not happening on my local system. It is happening at the backend at the ChatGPT server where it was situated. I am just getting the response from the backend, and the response has been displayed on my browser. So you can try to understand the basic fundamentals of HTTP request and HTTP response by simply understanding simple JavaScript functions. What this JavaScript function is doing is that it is calculating 2 plus 2. So I over here I call calculate 2 plus 2. Okay, I pass the argument as 2. There is a logic written over here or a function written over here which helps me return the value of 2 plus 2, which will be 4. Okay, so you can correlate this with the HTTP request and HTTP response of the websites. For example, over here, when I say ChatGPT, please give me answer of 2 plus 2. This is nothing but the front end part over here, which over here I am just calling the function by its name. So this is equivalent to the request which I generated from the front end, HTTP request which I am trying to generate from the front end, and the logic where I am getting the response of exactly is 2 plus 2 is 4. So this logic is equivalent to the backend, which is the backend server of the of ChatGPT, which was situated in the US, and this ChatGPT server was doing all the costly computation and returning back me with the HTTP response. So over here you can see this is a URL, and if you need to understand how this URL, how these routes work, you can try to correlate this with an example of a phone number of your friend. Suppose if you need to call your friend, you would be requiring their phone number, right? So their phone number must be unique. Similarly, this URL also are unique, and if you want to reach out to your friend, you will simply dial the number. I will simply hit this URL, and as soon as you dial the number, you would be able to call your friend from wherever you are. Similarly, as soon as you hit this URL on the browser, you would be able to channel your channel or route your HTTP request from India to all the way to the US where the ChatGPT backend server is situated. So when you are trying to create an HTTP request from the front end and trying to hit the backend and trying to communicate it with the backend from the front end, these are the things that you need to worry about while creating the HTTP request. So the first thing is the protocol which we are going to use to communicate between the front end and the backend. Second is the address, the URL or the domain name of your website. Then the route, then the headers, and the last one is the method. So now let's try to understand these each of them one by one. So over here you can see the first one was the protocol. The protocol which we were majorly going to use is HTTP or HTTPS, and the second one is the URL. The URL is nothing but over here it is flipkart.com. It is a unique domain name through which I can access that particular website which I want to uh, fetch my response from, HTTP response from. And the next in line is routes. Routes is nothing but the subsection or the sub web page which I want to open after I have opened the main website with help of the URL. Suppose if I want to open the cameras section of the flipkart.com, then I will simply add slash cameras, and uh, the backend will handle this particular HTTP request and will send me the response of all the available cameras from the database. Later on, there is headers. Header comprises of all the cookies or the tokens which I will be using it for the authentication purpose. My backend APIs would only get processed unless and until my token or cookies has been authenticated properly. Later on, there is body. So from the chat GPT, as you saw that I was trying to uh, send what is 2 plus 2. So this is nothing but my body. I am sending my request or the data from the front end to the back end that please calculate the 2 plus 2. You can consider body as the arguments of the function that we simply send over here. As you can see, consider this as a body. Uh, but the body is nothing but like the arguments which we send from the front end to the back end so that the back end can process over that data. And later on there is a method. So over here you can see, then later on you can see over here there is method, and there are various type of methods: get, post, put and delete. Get is used to fetch data from the URL. Post is used to submit any data. Suppose if you want to submit uh, that my age is 25, then I need to submit it. My name is Aditya. I need to submit it to the database. Then I will use post uh, post method over here. Then there is put. Suppose if I need to update my age from 25 to 26, then I will use the put method, and with help of put method I will hit the URL. And then I suppose if I don't want my credentials or my name in that particular website, or I want to delete my name or my existence from that website or from the database, then I will use delete. So now let us try to understand things HTTP server needs to consider while sending the response, and it's need to take care about. First is response headers. Then there is response body. Response body is nothing but the response that we are going to send. From ChatGPT, I tried to send to what is 2 plus 2, and I got 4. So the 4 is nothing but the response over here. And later on there is status code. Status codes help us understand what was the status of the response that we get. The result of the entire HTTP request response pipeline, we come to know the result about it with help of the status codes. So there are various status codes. 200, suppose 200 is received when the response is okay, you successfully got 2 plus 2 equal to 4, then the response would be 200. 404 is nothing but suppose you are trying to access the camera page of the Flipkart, but there is no such route which handles the HTTP request to fetch all the cameras from the database. So if there is no such route or no such page, then 404 will be responded from the HTTP server, and this signifies that the route does not exist or page does not exist. Then there is 403 authentication error. So this happens when suppose the JWT token which you pass in the headers is not accurate or it is not correct, and the authentication fails and you are unable to access the data from the REST APIs which you have wrote. uh, so in this case, you will get 403, and the last is the 500, which is internal server error. So now let's come back to the ChatGPT website. I wrote, I requested ChatGPT to give me answer of 2 plus 2 or 2 equal to 2 over here. So if you want to open this particular tab, which is visible in my screen on Chrome, you can simply right click over here and click on inspect and then navigate to the network tab. And over here, you can see there are various requests made to ChatGPT backend server from my front end to calculate the response of 2 plus 2. This is, as you can see, this is the request URL which got hit, and the request method was post method. The status code which I received was 200. Okay, that means that I successfully received the response from the HTTP server, and there were no errors. And this is the remote address of my of the ChatGPT backend server. And over here you can see this is the authorization token. This is the token which we send in form of headers from our front end to back end so that our authentication happens before the backend routes get hit. Don't worry guys, if this is sounding a bit complex to you, then don't worry, we will be understanding these things, each and everything in detail in the upcoming videos when we try to create our own backend servers with help of Express. So now that you are familiar with what HTTP servers are, now you can also create your own HTTP servers which are capable enough to handle and consume the HTTP request and share or return a valid HTTP response in return. So you can create your own HTTP server with a famous library known as Express. So now in the next video, we will be creating our own HTTP servers with help of Express, and we will be creating different routes to handle different HTTP requests and return the response for the same. Then we will be learning how to hit the HTTP routes with help of Postman and dig deep inside what are headers, how query params work, how to send request body with help of post method, and also to manipulate data with help of put and delete in the backend. And so please stay tuned. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful, and stay tuned for the next video. I hope you will learn definitely something new in the next video as well.